You like dinosaurs? You like modern paleontology? That's the study of dinosaurs. Then you're in luck. Because today we're talking about the mighty bone wars. That one time that two scientists pretty much had a bone to pick with each other, and things ended very, very badly. Hello! Welcome to Brain Spill, the laziest show on the internet. My name is Tank, and today we're talking about two scientists on their battle and their journey for the discovery of dinosaurs in the modern age. Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope would begin a bitter rivalry which resulted in the aptly named Bone Wars. However, things were not always frosty between these two paleontologists, with their relationship being quite amicable in the 1860s. The two would go on and actually make some of the most well-renowned discoveries from dinosaurs such as Triceratops, Brontosaurus and Stegosaurus. So, whilst these two deserve thanks for their efforts in furthering the discovery in the field of paleontology, their feud certainly made it an explosive affair, and one which certainly also had negative impacts on the field for many, many years to come. Yeah, these guys originally were actually quite chill with each other, so much so that they even decided to name discoveries after each other, whilst relations were still fairly positive. However, things would change very quickly. Particularly so that once things got personal, they got very underhanded with how they went about things, and that's probably why this is such a well-known story today. So, just to have a bit of an explanation of these guys, they're both quite eccentric characters, and they would become more and more untrusting of each other as the years went on. Despite the official title being the Bone Wars, you may as well have called it the Marsh and Cope Wars with how much these guys disliked each other. The pair would be sending their expeditions to the American West, where a lot of large fossil finds were happening during the early 1870s. The two were wealthy and could pay for excavators to ship findings back to them, in order for them to analyse and publish the specimens they find. However, they'd begun to get quite competitive, with Cope himself attempting to reconstruct the findings of a dinosaur named Elasmosaurus in record time, who ended up making a few mistakes and publishing the results to then only realise later on that his reconstruction was flawed due to the fact that he had pretty much misplaced where the head and tail should have been on this animal. This was due to a mix-up with the long neck actually being a long tail, meaning that he got the animal completely back to front, and something which he was no doubtly ridiculed for when he realised that he'd made this massive, massive error. As a result of getting the head at the wrong end of the spine, Marsh noted the mistake and took great pleasure in this, pointing out Cope's errors, resulting in the relationship to tank to new lows. Paleontologists started sending hasty telegrams to report their findings on numerous specimens. However, the problem with these telegrams and the new species that were being found was a lot of the time they were already discovered. They weren't new specimens. If they just took a little bit more time to actually double check what they were finding, then maybe they would have realised that. But pride was on the line, people. This even extended to failing to check the men who were hired as part of their excavation crews, such as when Marsh discovered that two of his own men were actually employed by Cope. He was pissed. There was even an instance where one of the men accidentally sent a fossil to Cope instead of Marsh at one of his dig sites. This escalated to spying, bribes, sabotage, anything they could do to try and impede the progress of their fellow expert paleontologist in the field. Marsh would even go as far as bribing the mine operators in New Jersey for them to send him the most interesting new finds they got, which of course came as no surprise that Cope was shocked and appalled to discover that such an underhanded agreement had been made. It was around this time in America that the Transcontinental Railroad was just being completed, and you know what that means. As soon as this was completed, everything went absolutely haywire. People were going everywhere, making discoveries, basically just trying to do whatever they can to try and get one over on the other person. One of my personal favourite things that happened was when Cope bribed some of the train operators to send Marsh's men the complete opposite way to the direction they were meant to be going, which is pure class, if you ask me. However, despite Cope's best efforts, the reality of the situation was that Marsh was just more wealthy. He was able to hire more people to go out into more dig sites and basically find new discoveries at a much faster rate. And this is the particularly sad part of the whole story because, yes, they might do these little things to try and impede the progress of the other dig sites, but Marsh would even go out of his way to instruct his men to destroy fossils that are found, basically just to do anything to try and prevent Cope from getting a one leg up on him. So yes, whilst these men were taking a lot of time and money to research and find these things out, they were also making actions which were also negatively affecting the research, purposely destroying specimens just to prove a point. Yeah, it's these sorts of things that does make you wonder whether it was all worth it at the end of the day. Cope, in response, would try and send dinosaur rustlers to a dig site in 1878 in an attempt to quietly steal fossils from Marsh's dig sites. But this quickly exploded. No pun intended. The rustlers began to get even more forceful in their captures of fossils, throwing rocks at the other prospectors and even almost starting a full-out gunfight at one of the dig sites itself. Thankfully, that never happened, but it was pretty close and tensions must have been running high, particularly when your bosses absolutely hate each other. So yes, despite all of that, it would eventually dawn on Cope that perhaps he was on the losing end of all of this, due to the fact that Marsh could simply throw more money at this venture. He had so much more to give, and because of it, the results he would gain would slowly but surely outpace Cope. Due to the fact that Marsh just simply had more resources to be able to undertake these digs, Cope would publicly sling Marsh as a result of his one-upmanship, claiming that Marsh plagiarised his work, to which Marsh responded in kind. Things just got messy. So, what happened? Did this feud ever end? Did these guys ever come back together and just agree to go back to the way things were? No, of course it didn't. This feud, as far as we're aware, lasted all the way up until Cope's death. Even in death, Cope wanted one last chance to try and get his own back at Marsh, claiming that he was willing to donate his skull for science, but more so due to the fact that he wanted Marsh to do the same in order to scientifically prove that he had the bigger skull, aka the bigger brain. Marsh didn't take him up on that offer, unfortunately. The ripple effects of this entire saga would pretty much last until modern paleontology today. Like I said, these guys were massively influential in this area, but probably also very well known for their hatred of one another, hence why this became a topic on Brain Spill today. The pair discovered an awful lot of specimens and achieved a lot in the field, but ultimately much of their work would be clarified or questioned later, with a whopping 142 unique species being discovered between the two, which would eventually be reduced down to about 40 unique species that were actually unique and valid dinosaurs, which was later clarified by scientists in the field. So yes, dinosaurs are cool, and the Mighty Bone Wars is just one chapter in this mighty, mighty dinosaur world. So yeah, you want to see a similar video? Click here. I'll see you guys in the next video. Fantastic.